This is Councilor MALDONADO-VELEZ calling the Charter and Rules Committee meeting to order. It is Monday, October 24th at 6:30 p.m. at Holyoke City Hall. With me today, I have the Vice Chair, Councilor Murphy Ramboletti, and we also have our other committee member, our very own President, Mr. McGee. We are also live on Boxcast, Holyoke Media, and on Channel 15 for those that are watching at home. So with that, I'd like to entertain a motion to take items 1 through 4 together as a package.
Take up 1 through 4 as a package.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So take up items 1 through 4 together. So starting off with item 1, which is to relook at committee responsibilities and restructure. Item 2 is that we create a cannabis committee to strictly deal with marijuana special permits and ordinance changes related to cannabis. Item 3, that we add the following committees to the city council, which are zoning committee, dealing with zoning changes in language, public way committee, dealing with handicap spots, parking, and traffic ordinances, development committee, focusing on grants and economic development. And then item 4, Councilor Rivera ordered that the Honorable City Council add the following committees, which are Communications Committee, Senior Citizen Quality of Life Committee. Since I filed 3 of them just to let y'all know where I'm at. Item 1, we'll love to keep, just revisit it until our next meeting as we keep relooking at it. I would love to ideally move on item 2 to hopefully create a cannabis committee. I think one of the biggest holdups in our ordinance committee is a lot of cannabis issues, and even one of the orders is around expanding, talking about social consumption. We've had an issue at True Leaf, or cultivating place, so I think cannabis, essentially deserves its own committee and its own, not a 5-member committee, but 3 counselors that can really go deep into cannabis. So that's where I'm at with item 2. With item 3, if it was something that we were to move on today, zoning would be the one to go with, and that's where I've been with that. And then I would let Councilor Rivera speak about item 4, where he's at with those committee recommendations.
Is he online?
Yes. Councilor Izzy. You're kind of breaking up.
Okay, that's probably my internet. But can you hear me still, or am I still breaking up?
Yeah, no, you're good now.
Okay, so on the communications committee, originally the idea for me was to try to streamline communication and streamline messaging, especially around the city's messaging that they're putting out in the community. There's a variety of different departments that we have, and I kind of wanted it to be streamlined all through one message, one point of contact type of thing. But that doesn't necessarily have to be a committee. Now that I've thought about it and kind of did my research around it, that's something that I could have a better conversation with the mayor and some of the department heads to try to find out how to better tackle that. So if you guys could leave to withdraw that one, that would be great. I'd appreciate that one. And then the senior citizens quality of life one, that one, it more or less is similar, not similar, but I guess it goes along with the youth commission one that we want, that Jose and I kind of we're in the process of trying to create, because it's a confusion with the school department. So the idea behind the senior citizen one is just for us as a committee to focus more or less on what things are happening in the community for the senior citizens, and how we can provide them more access, help them get access to a lot of different programming that already exists, help them get aware, and as well as providing more focused attention around whatever it is that they may need, whether it's help with taxes, covering the gap when taxes go up or when sewer rates go up, keeping them aware, or things like that, or of that nature, more or less. So for me, it was creating a committee that focuses mostly on that. If people want to continue and see if that could go through, that would be great. If people could think that is a duplication of a service, would be great to hear that as well, because I filed it thinking that there wasn't something like this already, and if there is, then maybe you guys can help me get hip to game. But that's about it.
Thank you, Councilor Rivera. Councilor Murphy-Ramboletti.
So I would like to, I don't know if Councilor Rivera has talked to our senior center director, Neve. I would love to kind of hear some of her thoughts on that, because I'm sure she would probably be a useful resource. Some of it I do think is similar to the communications committee, where maybe it's just strengthening existing relationships and the way that we communicate, working with the mayor's office and relevant departments. But I don't know, Councilor Rivera, if you've had a chance to check in with Neve, but that's something I'm definitely interested in learning more about.
Cool. Thank you, Councilor Murphy-Ramboletti. Anyone else? Councilor McGee.
That's what I was going to say, is check with the senior center. I know they provide a lot of resources and meetings and everything. Maybe it's just not being told or broadcasted enough. I know the assessor's office does the tax qualification for seniors and stuff. So I would invite in, the assessor. I'd invite in the senior center and Neve, and just see if we can just better educate the public on it. Do we need a committee for it? Maybe no. Maybe the senior center in and of itself is that committee. They just have to, or we have to, all of us, broadcast it better.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that Mayor Garcia has joined us in chambers, and Attorney Michael Bissonette is on the Zoom. Councilor Rivera, your hand is up.
So I hear you both, and I will follow up with Neve. I spoke to her in the past about something similar, but not exactly in detail of exactly what I filed. I guess for me, the disconnect lands in the people that live and pretty much in the towers, like Veterans Towers, all the variety of different towers. They don't, to my understanding, they don't usually frequent the senior center. So that's the thing for me, is it's increasing, access to the senior center and helping people that don't actually attend the senior center, because there is a lot that happens at the senior center. It's actually a pretty good spot. It's actually connected, but I have an aunt that's never been there, and that, and for me, it's trying to see how I can get my aunt and a variety of other people to visit this place, because there are a lot of resources that are there for them as well. So maybe I'll have a conversation with Nevea and find out what initiatives or what actions they have taken to try to reach out to a lot of the seniors that are in some of these the senior towers and stuff like that. Try to get them to visit the senior center more often, so that way it can be what it is, pretty much that spot where the seniors can get all the information and all the stuff for quality of life there, as it is intended to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy-Ramboletti.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to add, that's a really good point. And I do think what Councilor McGee was saying, that there's probably a role for the city council to be taking to help facilitate that. And I'm sure I'd love to be supportive of Neve however we can and her efforts there, and see if it's just a matter of us supporting them a little bit more as far as that goes. So thank you.
Councilor McGee.
I'd say probably connecting Neve, us, Matt Mainville, the Housing Authority, and once again, everyone's doing their stuff, and this is probably just something that kind of got lost in the shuffle. Yeah. But it's something that I know Matt would do it, I know Neve would do it, and basically go throughout the towers and say, here's another resource that maybe you're not aware of.
Yeah.
And then it gets them right on that track, and now they're going to the senior center, or they get communications from Housing Authority from the senior center, and it all intertwines. So I think that it might just be a disconnect that we just got to connect the dots to.
Cool. Councilor Rivera, your hand's still up.
Sorry, and thank you guys for that.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to make sure. All right. So that was on item 4. we like to move forward on any?
A motion to make, or to give leave, no,
Well, he
complied with?
Well, he wanted to give
Oh, we should have Neve come
one
in.
leave to withdraw, but then we want Neve and I
Could
think
we-
Matt to come in.
we take-
I'd say just table it and invite them
Okay.
in, and then once that's done, we can say complied with all of it, if that's.
Yeah, I
the
forgot they
ultimate.
were in the same order.
Yeah,
So the motion is to table item 4
with an invite
with an
to
invite to Neve and
Matt, so the Senior Center and Housing Authority.
to Senior Center and Housing Authority.
Could we invite in,
Can we do one Holyoke too? Because they have Veterans Tower.
yeah,
Sure, yeah,
and I was gonna say O'Connell.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
O'Connell.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so it's table item 4 with an invite to the Senior Center, Housing Authority, One City C, O'Connell's
Development.
Development, to the next Charter and Rules meeting, whenever that would be.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
I,
Hi.
Any opposed? Okay, so that is item 4. Then item 1, 2, and 3 are still up. How do y'all feel about a cannabis committee? I guess is the question. Councilor Murphy Umberletti.
I think, like, at first when I saw all of these orders filed and there's like all these committees, I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, there's a lot already. But I did some research on what other municipalities do. And, like, I think, Councilor, you've mentioned this before, but, like, Chicopee has, like, 25 committees. They don't meet all the time. They meet sometimes when it's relevant, but I also know that we've talked about maybe some of these are ad hoc committees. But for something like item 2, the Cannabis Committee, I mean, I think if it's about making government more efficient, then doing something like this might make sense, because we've all watched ordinance committee meetings, and it's a lot on the chair, it's a lot on the committee members themselves. So I think it makes sense. I don't know what exactly that looks like and when that takes effect. Those are some of my questions. Like, as a new city councilor, I don't even know how that works. So those are just my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy Umberletti. Councilor McGee.
Yeah, and I think along the same lines is, I mean, you can have many committees and then assign it out accordingly. The real issue is, do you need multiple committees, or do you just need to move some of the work in another committee to a committee that's not meeting as much? So I'm not saying it should go here or anything else, but as an example, we move cannabis to public safety, public service, because they don't meet every Tuesday or every Wednesday like finance or something like that. Could you do it that way and say public safety is now public safety / cannabis, kind of like the joint committee? I'm not saying public safety, I'm not saying public service, but just an example. Does that help alleviate some of what ordinance is going through? Maybe. And I know we did that with ordinance. We had too much going in there, so we pushed stuff over to DGNR. I think there was a time where we moved stuff to public service. So we have shifted stuff. I think that's something also to look at, instead of having multiple committees where you have 5 committees you serve on. I mean, does 1 or 2 suffice? I don't know, but just a suggestion.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilor Israel Rivera.
So I didn't think about what Todd said right now until he just said it. Like, that kind of makes sense, to split it. If we could move in that direction, that's cool too. But I kind of support the Cannabis Commission piece, mostly because at ordinance, it does take up a lot of ordinance. And when it comes to like ordinance itself, like, cannabis is actually pushing back a lot of actual work that we need to do in ordinance, because we're taking up so many public hearings. There are so many people applying on a regular basis for new licenses. Like, it's not like if we could move some of it to a committee that, like Todd has mentioned, that doesn't take up as much, maybe DGNR or whatever. I mean, I don't know. Whichever one it fits, that makes sense too as well. But I feel like ordinance already has a lot on their plate as it is. So that we have to kind of do something just so that we're not there till 12 o'clock every ordinance meeting. All right, that's it.
Agreed. Thank you, Councilor Rivera. No, I following your thought, before this meeting, I was like, do I want to meet more throughout the week or less? And I'm like, I think I'd rather have like a 1 hour meeting more frequently than 5 hour meetings. I don't know, but that's just me. And I guess it all depends on what we're talking about for that 1 hour or 5 hours. But this one is in particular, I do believe, item 3, we can talk about more, but I think with item 2, cannabis has been, one of the biggest topics in the last at least decade. It's going to be one of the biggest topics for the next decade. Still in it, I think one of the biggest issues when we came in as a new council had to do around cannabis and the Scrivener's error and all those things. So, that's sort of my thinking around the Cannabis Committee, having a dedicated, committee that is strictly their focus. I do understand the argument of putting them in other sort of committees or just giving the other responsibilities, but it's still very general, and when I envision this sort of Cannabis Committee is very just focused and sort of laser-eyed on cannabis. But this is my thought on that. I have that. Jeffrey, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to offer some perspective just in terms of thinking out the impact of this kind of change in that, part of, moving cannabis related orders or permits to somewhere else or creating its own committee, part of it would be the special permits and setting up those public hearings. Part of it also would be dealing with the marijuana ordinance, which gets into zoning, which gets into coordinating with the planning board and that kind of thing. And so I want to make sure that that's a part of the discussion, is that it would include working with the marijuana ordinance and all of the work that would go along with that.
Cool. Thank you. Anything else? Councilor Murphy on body.
No, I was just nodding my head. That was a really
Cool.
great point. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
I don't know if you're hoping to make a decision tonight, but
the committee wants to do.
Well, one, you want to keep on going, from what I heard you say. 2, 3, also you want to keep on going? Or?
Yes.
All right, so how about we say for 1 and 3, motion is to table those?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So that's 3-0 that they're both tabled.
And then back to 2.
Get back to 2. Do we want to make a decision now? I'm all about it now. If
I just don't have an answer for it.
Yeah, I mean, if you want it to go to the full council to have a discussion about it,
Right.
I mean, Jeffrey brought up a good point, so I'm just kind of
so, we should wait on.
Should we?
I mean, I guess one of my questions that come up is sort of legal form, and technically any committee can ask legal for a legal form or a legal language or ordinance change, correct? Or does it only have to come from the ordinance committee?
I would say send this to legal to see if we can set up a committee that also addresses the points that Jeffrey made as well as what we're trying to do.
I think Siri is ready to answer.
So I don't even know how that just went off, but she's already doing the work for us.
there you go.
I didn't even touch it. That's weird. So, I'd say maybe legal researching and seeing if we can establish a committee like this that encompasses the ordinances and everything else, so it addresses everything that was just brought up.
Okay.
And then if they put something in format, now we have something that we can send off to the full body to vote on. Right now, it's just, do you want to do it? Well, what are the parameters? How, you know?
Makes sense. Thank you.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Second.
So the motion right now is to send it to legal with a report back on an example of how to set up a cannabis committee with some of the concerns that our admin assistant just brought up. Is that clear, Attorney Bissonnette?
Good evening, all.
Hello.
Yes, it is. I'm happy to work on that.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, as I'll let you know when the next charter and rules meeting is, at least a month in advance.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Cool. So, would you want to table?
So I think its motion is to send to legal, and they have to refer back to us.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. So that's all set then.
Okay. Can I make a motion to take item 7 out of order?
Second.
The mayor's here.
Motion to take item 7 out of order. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So item 7, it is filed by Councilor Murphy-Ramboletti that the City of Holyoke, through its Honorable City Council and Honorable Mayor, hereby petitions the Mass General Court to enact the legislation establishing an appointed treasurer for the City of Holyoke. That the General Court may reasonably vary the form and substance of the requested legislation with the scope of the general public objectives of this petition, which reads, an act establishing an appointed treasurer for the City of Holyoke. So this act proposes to change the city treasurer from an elected position to an appointed one. The appointment will be made by the mayor with approval of the city council for a term not to exceed 5 years, and qualifications for the position may be established by ordinance. And if adopted, the treasurer elected in the 2023 municipal election will fill the vacancy in the office for the remaining 2 years, and a treasurer will be appointed to the position following the expiration of that term in January 2026, or sooner if the office is vacated. Councilor Murphy-Ramboletti.
Thank you. This is something that I have felt very strongly about bringing before the council so that we can bring this before the voters. For those who may not be familiar, there was years ago an attempt to change the city's charter, but it did not pass before the voters, and there was a lot of pieces to it, and there was a lot of things that people were voting on. And so this was sort of part of it, a variation of it, and this is a conversation that I think a lot of us on the council and the mayor, we've all been having, to establish an appointed treasurer for the city of Holyoke versus the current way that it is designed through our government is that is an elected position. This order specifically indicates that the appointment will be made by the mayor with the approval of the city council. And so that's something I intentionally wanted to have us discuss. I'm personally not anticipating making a decision this evening. I know that this is, a really important conversation that we need to have. But I think the way that our city government currently is set up is there is a lack of checks and balances. And right now, the way that our government is created is that we, the city council, appoint the auditor, the assessor, the tax collector, and these are really important positions, and it's great that we have that authority, but currently, as our government stands, our mayor does not have the authority, any appointing authority to any financial department at City Hall. And working in city government for 5 years, I worked at City Hall, as we all know, but it's not the most practical solution, and in fact, it's not what the state recommends. The state, year after year, has given suggestions to Holyoke and has encouraged us to explore restructuring our government in this way. So I filed this order because I think we need to have the conversation. I think it behooves us to put this before the voters. And in order to do so, which would be, I mean, for next fall, if we wanted to do that, we need to start having these conversations now. So that's really why I filed it. And I'm grateful the mayor's here, and we're also joined by our city treasurer. So I will leave it at that.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy-Ramboletti. The mayor is here, so is our treasurer, Rory Casey, is here. I just blanked on your last name. Sorry, Rory. So if y'all have anything to say, y'all can come in to take a seat and join us in the conversation.
Good evening, councilors.
Good evening.
Yeah, and I think, so there was at one time when the full charter was taken up and got voted down. It was taken up another time, just the question alone. I do think part of the major reason why that question was voted down at that time, when it was a standalone question, is because there wasn't enough education. There was no campaign for or against. We weren't really united in talking about what the pros and cons are, and getting the public to understand why this is an important change. I think now we have that unique opportunity to have that discussion at this level, the councilors together, and continue to have that conversation with the community so that we better understand and get more aligned to stand behind this specific objectives. And the objective really is to strengthen internal controls here in the city of Holyoke. We have a checks and balance system that's three-way at the moment. And because local government, specifically in the treasurer's office, has become more complex, it opens us up for, we're vulnerable at the moment. Election time comes around. We have to hope and pray that whoever gets elected is, if not, hasn't done it anywhere else and understands, but at least understands how to navigate the complexities behind how to get the system working the way you need to. But this particular change, I think will allow us to hold greater accountability to who we put in that position, and making sure that they have the qualifications and the standards needed to keep up with that particular role. And we have the auditor, who's the legislative check. Nothing gets through unless the auditor, who's appointed by the council, agrees with it, that procurement laws were followed, that it was appropriately appropriated. So I can see how this executive function, it makes sense to make it a mayoral appointee, but regardless how the systems we decide and what you guys want to go forward with, it's about strengthening internal controls so that we reduce the liabilities to local resources. I don't know, Rory, if you wanted to, Mr. Treasurer, add to that.
Yeah, if that's appropriate. I would just echo what the mayor has said, especially when we talk about the complexity of this office. We've all spent time looking at the charter. We know that it's been around for a very long time. It served the city well, over the years. And, when it was written at the time, electing the person on an annual basis, because that's what it was at the time. Every year there were municipal elections. The role of the treasurer was very simple. They collected the funds and they protected the funds. The cash, the actual cash, hard currency and checks that came into the city. Wanting to make sure that whomever had that, responsibility was held accountable to the electorate made all the sense in the world. And to a certain extent, it still does. However, the role has changed so greatly over the years. First, it's a 4-year term now as opposed to a 1-year term. meaning that whoever has that job is going to have it for at least 4 years if they're elected. The functions of that office have evolved, both through changes in the city ordinance, of course, the state law as well. So now you have you expect somebody who's been elected, by the people of Holyoke to not only be the person responsible for collecting and protecting the funds, but also all payroll functions for the city, gas and electric, for the school department, some of the largest departments, every department in the city, with the exception of the waterworks, which is its own separate entity, flows through the treasurer's office. So that means everything. That's not just about signing the checks. It's about making sure that payroll, life insurance, health insurance, dental, vision, all the other kinds of ancillary benefits that the city offers are all up to date, maintained, that all the records are being kept. And that's just payroll. You want to talk about investments. I was here last week talking about investments, another very important role in the treasurer's office. Processing all of the accounts payable. There's so many different functions in that office that when you look at similarly sized organizations, be it government or not, these are separate individual offices, and right now it's one person elected by the people who's responsible for so many different specialty areas where people are out. You just take the payroll side of things. There's some people that would have a 4 or maybe a master's level degree to manage the type of payroll operation that we have. So it's a way to professionalize the operation, to still have that check and balance, because being appointed by a mayor, who's ultimately held accountable by the citizenry, approved by a council, who's in the same position, you still are going to have that level of check and balance that exists. But you're able to hold that individual accountable. I think that when you have a department head at this level, you want to be able to hold them accountable, for any of the different things that may come up. So it's certainly something I'm in favor of, especially my short time. I was already in favor of it in my short time being in the office and seeing just the level of complexity that truly exists. It just makes all the sense in the world.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Anyone else? So the only my thoughts around this is I agree. It shouldn't be elected just because of a lot of what y'all said. I think the position itself is. It used to be that, just collecting money and just keeping track of that, but I know it's much more complicated than that. You just mentioned master's level, and I don't think it's required, but that's the sort of level work that it is in that position now. So to just be an elected position, I don't think is right. I think going off that, I also don't think that this would be the final. I don't think this is a solution either to the final solution to what our financial department can look like in our city. But I think it is one step closer in that direction. Councilor Israel Rivera has their hands up.
Thank you. I think the only that I would probably suggest, because I agree with a lot of what's been said tonight, is changing from 5 years to 3 contract. Just because 5 years is a long time, and I think other municipalities across the state are switching. A lot of different, I think private entities too are switching from 5 to 3. Just because it gives you more leeway, more space, just in case the person you hire is not actually ideally cut out, and it's a safety measure, I guess. But if it ends up being 5, I'd still agree with it. But I preferably would want it to say 3, but that's it.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor McGee.
Yeah, just to let you know, Patty Devine is also on via Zoom. She's part of the mayor's charter committee that he has set up and appointed her, correct?
Yeah, it's the Government Restructuring Advisory Committee. And she's on the committee.
She joined, just to let you know she's on with regards to this, because that would be
Her hand's
part of
up.
it.
You want to let her speak?
Yeah, if she has her hand up. I just didn't know if you knew.
Oh, no. Hold on. There. Councilor McGivern just walked into the chambers. Hello, Councilor McGivern. And Patty, I see your hand is up. Okay, you should be able to speak.
It's on mute.
She's muted, yeah.
There we go. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. I absolutely agree that this change has to be made in the charter. I agree with what the mayor said and with Rory said and the city council committee said. My only suggestion would be to do it as part of the mayoral term. If you do it for 3 years and the mayor decides not to run or whatever, you may be leaving a new mayor with only 1 year left or 2 years left of that, if that makes sense. I do like the fact that it should be appointed by the mayor as part of that financial group that needs to be accessed or, put into a specialized finance group. But I do think it should be for the term of the mayor, since the mayor is going to appoint the treasurer with confirmation by the city council, if that's proper as well. But I think it should, the years should go in conjunction with the mayoral term, since he is the one that is doing the appointment. If the city council does the confirmation, they're only there for 2 years. So that's why I think it should correspond with, just my opinion, that it should correspond with the mayor's term.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay.
Just a
Councilor McGee.
clarification, it says, qualification for the position may be established by ordinance. Are we saying that we're going to establish it first? Or, if this were to be approved, then, because qualifications, people should know what the qualifications are that you're looking for and then being appointed, I guess, is the question I have.
That'd be to the maker.
Yeah. No, that's a good question. I think for this, we could establish those qualifications by ordinance after the fact, after it gets brought before the voters. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I guess so if I'm a voter and we're saying, hey, look, we're going to change from elected to appointed by the mayor and the council, and it's going to be for 4 years, 3 years, 5 years, and it's going to be X.
Okay.
Well, then X represents, we want someone of the masters, we want this, that. And as a voter, I want to know that. Or am I just saying, hey, look, yeah, you can appoint who you want after you do the ordinance? No. I want to know what your qualifications are.
Okay, that's a good point.
I was due for one.
I'll let Patty go. Then I'm happy to.
Patty has her hands up. Go ahead, Patty.
Yeah, sorry, just real quick, I think I lost my train of thought. Todd, what were you saying previously? I don't know, certainly if you want to put this towards the voters, but since it's a charter change, I think all you need to do, the mayor can do a home rule petition and have the legislature okay the wording, and then you can work on the ordinance later. I think that's, in my opinion, that's what you should do. Because if it goes before the border voters and fails, you're back to square one.
Thank you, Patty. Councilor McGivern.
As we know, there's more than one way to change the charter, and what Patty just said is correct, and certainly if 2/3 of the city council agrees and the mayor signs off, we ask the legislature. There's a very good chance, though, the legislature is going to tell us it has to go on the ballot, because this is a direct form of our government established by charter, and it's not unusual for the legislature to tell us that that requires a ballot vote on, a question on the electoral docket itself, which I think is understandable. This is although I think for all the right reasons, most of us are in agreement with this. It is a major change in government. It's a major change in checks and balance. It's a big change in our financial structure and who's holding the keys to the Treasury, and that goes with a lot of authority over things that we do, bonding, and a lot of things that are currently under the umbrella of an elected official. So I don't think the legislature will do it. So we should probably be prepared for that and work on what we plan to replace. Once the elected part goes away, what we plan to replace in terms of appointing, confirmation, and things like that.
Thank you, Councilor McGivern. And what's Rory?
Yeah, I agree 100%, and I believe the language that was filed was actually modeled after the last time this was in front of the voters. And that language came directly from House Counsel. Obviously, that'll have to get checked with our current legislative team, but there already is an ordinance, a pretty lengthy ordinance, that deals with the roles and responsibilities of the treasurer's office. And, I certainly think that would be one of the concerns that I've heard over the years as it relates to the charter is if you put too much specificity in the charter, every time you want to make a change, you're going to have to go through this process that involves the legislature. If you keep it not vague, but simple in the charter and then reinforce that through the ordinances, that allows for the council and the mayor to, make those changes as positions and evolve, roles and responsibilities evolve, that the ordinances can be changed. So I'd be happy to send that along to folks. I spent a lot of time with that particular section of the ordinance, just because it relates to the office. And it's actually a very well-written ordinance. I don't know the history of exactly when it was first crafted, but it's right under the administrative section of the Code of Ordinances, I believe Section 2.
Thank you, Treasurer. Mr. Mayor, your hands up.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I wouldn't want it any other way. I'd love to see the question go in front of the voters, even if we could bypass. I wouldn't recommend that at all. It'd probably be very good practice, and it'll allow us to also speak to our neighbors and understand further what this potential ordinance can potentially look like. The charter change, once the charter is changed from elected to appointed, then that gives us, all of us here, to treat it as a normal department position, and then you can identify how that looks like in the ordinance. The other point I want to make too is just for the folks who might be watching at home and whatnot. It's what I'm trying to achieve here also is continuity. I think I've been having a wonderful time working with department heads, financial departments, strategic objectives, goals, even though I don't have direct oversight or control. But that's me. I don't know who your next mayor is going to be, and might not necessarily have that ability to coordinate as effectively and whatnot. But there's a lot of cleanup work we're investing in right now, a lot of hours, a lot of money. From what I was told, the same amount of hours and money happened before. And I remember a counselor asking a question, how did we get back? I thought we did all of this. How do we get back here? And I strongly believe that that's why, that continuity, protection of internal controls and accountability is just not there. If and when we do successfully make this change, at that point is when I do want to introduce the CAFO, the Chief Administrative Financial Officer. That I think at that point we'll have a well fluid operation in how the management of our finances are done, and making sure that we're able to keep up with the planning of how we invest that, right? Our capital planning, our forecasting, folks that know how to do that level of work, that can properly guide the decisions of the mayor, working together with the council.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Anyone else? Okay, no one on Zoom. So the only question I have, and it's around, I guess this would be to Attorney Bissonnette or any of the veteran counselors, how does this become a ballot question? Not that we're going to make it the ballot question today, but what is needed for a question to show up in the ballot next year?
I'm looking at one of you guys.
We have to vote for it to have it placed on the ballot within the proper time frame. And there's always, I always forget the timing of it, but we as the councils will say, and that's why I was bringing it up in the sense of my suggestion wasn't anything other than if we're going to do a ballot question, because that's what I thought we were doing. We have to really define the ballot question. We kick it out of here, send it to the full council. As long as approved, it goes over the mayor, and then we send it off in order to get that placed on the ballot with the state. So it's us adopting what we want as a question for the voters.
Okay.
So that's what I was saying, term not to exceed 5 years with qualifications for the position as defined by ordinance. Saying that there's an ordinance in place, kind of like Rory said, that defines it. Because the way it was reading is when we get to it, which is not really, I don't think what the voters would want to see. Semantics. But, yeah, we have to send out that ballot question.
And do you know what the timeline is?
We have to check with the clerk's office.
Okay.
I always forget what the
I know
time
Attorney
is.
Bissonnette is unmuted. Go ahead, Attorney Bissonnette.
It's usually the 10 days after the primary or preliminary election, because that gives time for the nominations to be ascertained and the ballots for the final election to be printed. So it has to be in the hands of the clerk or the Secretary of State if it's a state election, at least no later than 10 days, which I think we determined for the last municipal election was around August 23rd. So with that as a keep in mind, it would be next summer when this would have to be approved for the ballot.
Cool. Thank you, Attorney Bissonnette. With that said, I know we weren't going to do any final act on this item tonight. So with that said, I don't know if anyone has any other questions or would like to table this to the next meeting. So motion to table item 7.
Do you want to see if we can start drafting?
Yeah, I was going to say, would legal be able to help with drafting language? Is that how that works?
To refer to legal and then?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, I would just say that absolutely, that language that you have in front of you right now is the actual language from House Counsel and the Secretary of the Commonwealth's office from the last time this was a standalone ballot question. And even some of the things in there, some of the counselors may remember it was actually sent back and had to be re-voted on because of some of the language. So there is a bit of a back and forth. There's many bites at the apple that the council will have. So you guys have plenty of time. The one thing I would just note, having seen this process both at the State House and here at City Hall a few times, trying to get this to them prior to the time they start working on their budget in the spring is really helpful, because that just eats up so much of the legislature's time. And Attorney Bissonnette's absolutely right. Because this is a municipal election, there's a little bit more leeway than if it was a state election. But it still does need to make its way through the normal committee process at the State House. And I'm sure that Representative Duffy or Senator Velas, their offices would be able to help, guide. And in fact, you may want to invite them in to talk about, these orders and just the process in general.
Thank you, Rory. So with that said, I guess the motion would be then to refer to legal to start drafting a question.
Sure.
And then send it. Yeah, go ahead.
And then I would also say invite in our state delegation, or at least give us the opportunity to reach out to them to continue the conversation.
Cool. Okay. So the motion is to refer to legal to send back to us with the recommended ballot question that we can start discussing, and then also invite our state representative and state senator to the next meeting to discuss this topic as well. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you both.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Treasurer. Number 5. Motion to take up item 5.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So item 5 is an order put in by Councilor Murphy Ramboletti that the City Council amend its rules to create a vice president position in the City Council. Councilor Murphy Ramboletti.
Thank you. So I filed this actually not really realizing, it sounds like maybe this has been discussed before my time, maybe. But I filed this order for a couple reasons. But when I first started on the council, I was doing research on other, like what other municipalities do. And I thought it was interesting that we didn't have a vice president position in the council. And I'm sure there's reasons behind it. So that's kind of why I wanted to file this, just to have that conversation. But what actually motivated me to end up doing it was, I believe in Springfield, their city council president had to, I think he was leaving for work or something, but they had the vice president position already, and that person took over when the president could no longer fulfill that responsibility. And I just know that it's come up before, when there was a vacancy in the mayor's office, and so, that's why I filed it, and I'm hoping it's just going to be the start of a conversation on, pros and cons, and see if it makes sense for our body.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy Ramboletti. Anyone else? Councilor McGee.
Yeah, did we send what Jeffrey sent to all the councilors to look at all the different towns?
I believe so.
Yeah, this was sent back when it was taken up in June.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to look at all the different ways other towns or cities do it. I just like Agawam's. The councilor of the most seniority on the city council should sit to the left of the president. I just like, some
Yeah.
the left. Yeah. But I mean, I have no problem. I mean, it's something I think would address the issue in the sense that happened to me, which was I had to go sit in the mayor's office and be the acting mayor and the city council president. And then my issues occurred where I couldn't still be the acting mayor. And then, what could we do with the vice president had gone into there, and we'd have to put it in the rules somewhere, kind of the way we did it where then Terry went in and became mayor. So we'd have to, I bring up Agawam because they go from A to, Z. We have to put it somewhere in there that's saying if the president can't be the acting mayor, then the vice president takes over, and you don't have to do what we had to do.
Right.
So maybe, that's a good way to address some of the issues. So I'm just wondering, how would you come up with the final version, seeing how there are some really differences based on the communities. That's my only point in the sense of getting it out to others to say, yeah, I like Agawam, I don't like the way Springfield did. I did, not saying one's better than the other, but
Yep.
that would be my only thing in the sense of coming up with the final version.
Okay.
I'd say sit to the right, not to the left, the right.
Thank you, Councilor McGee. Councilor McGivern.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If the way this is written, I think to Councilor Murphy Ramboletti, it's a rule, but a rule is not going to cover anything of what was just said. That's charter. And again, this is part of our government where, the president of the city council can become the acting mayor, becomes the acting mayor, and what we went through during this last period of how and it wasn't just us. At the same time, Boston and Lawrence were doing similar special acts to the legislature to allow for their legislative bodies to decide who was going to be the acting mayor in a different way than what their charters said. So we can't do it just by rule. We could create a vice chair that is going to take over and run a meeting, but currently we do that as a body. The senior member present opens up the meeting, and the body decides who they want to replace the president if they're not at the particular meeting where we need to, we need a president to take over for someone to run the meeting. That's the easy part. The acting mayor part is charter, and that's much different. And then there's a lot to it. Do the voters just want, a vice chair or a vice president to become an acting mayor? And if so, I think that has to be spelt out in the charter in a way that everybody can, agree with it.
Thank you, Councilor McGivern. I was going to say a quick thank you to to Jeffrey. Because I know if it's anything like our Muni code, like all this information is probably everywhere, all over the city websites, and so just appreciate you getting all this into one document. When I read this, I think the questions were like, is it going to be a rule, a charter change, or an ordinance? So I was like looking at some of following what Councilor McGivern just said. There are some rules that we can change, sort of like 3B, I think it is, where it's like in the absence of the president, then the senior member, that would be like, instead of the senior member, would be like the vice president that we elect, something like that. But then I was looking at the charter, and I think it's section 11, where just one line, for example, which is to Councilor McGivern's point, where it's like, the president may be removed from the presidency of the city council by the affirmative vote of 2/3 of the members thereof taken by roll call. And then so then who replaced that? That means the vice president will replace that position, and those are the sort of things that we need to include, depending on what we want the vice president position to really be and the power that it holds. So I do agree that I think a VP position would be good. I think continuity and just having another representative, and in case something were to happen to the president, the VP needs to step up or step in for anything, I think that'd be good. But yeah, we just got to figure out how we want to put it into our words.
I think to both. That was my point. You got to do it to both charter and to our rules.
Cool. So what do you want to do?
So, I mean, technically we could make this a rule, and then I guess part of it is for me, not just about what happens if there's a vacancy in the mayor's office, but also, if you're sick, or if there's a public event that you can't make it to, it shouldn't be on you to be like, which counselor am I gonna try to get to go to this? It's kind of it's a leadership role that kind of supports the president, I guess, is also a way that I'm seeing this could be really useful. But so it does sound like it should be two separate things. So I guess for the purposes of this order that I filed, it could be more of having the vice president position, and we could come up with some language that would just talk about what to do in your absence, or for support for a meeting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 'cause I do believe we have one rule that says if a committee doesn't have enough members, the president can sit in. The president's not here, then the chair of the committee can pick someone. So we're, which then now is, well, if the vice president is here, they step in if the president's not here. So we have to really tweak everything to do that, which is not hard. It's just that type of stuff we have to watch out for to.
So I think we could, for the purposes of this, we could table this to spend some time. I mean, I could come up with some of my own thoughts and we could discuss it at another meeting of maybe elaborating a little bit on the order I filed there. I don't know. I'm willing to do that.
A motion.
I don't know if that was a motion, but
Let's let it get written before we make that motion.
Just real quick, we don't want to make it confusing to a point where rules and charter, conflict, or where people have a perception that, well, we now by rules have a vice president, but by charter we have a president. Remember that rule that we all went through after the last November election? We had a lot of discussion about this body cannot take any action, do any work until we reorganize and appoint the president. That's charter. So our president is by charter, and it's not just about being the acting mayor, it's about everything we do. So again, that comes down, the charter belongs to the voters, not to the city council, not to the mayor, but to all the voters. So I think if we're going to have the president by charter, if we really want a vice president, if it's, it's certainly worth discussion, it needs to be by charter, and it needs to be very thought out, because there's a lot of things we don't think about that the president is about, and how we establish that is I think the key here. The rules are just like Todd said, they're governing rules, filling in here, doing this here, doing that, that's all we can do by rule. But creating a body that would replace a body that's created under the charter, is what we have to, I think if we want to do it, we have to lean towards.
Cool. So I'm hearing that
I'll make a motion to table it so we can keep working on it.
Motion to table so that we can keep working on it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It is tabled. Motion to take up item 6.
Take up item 6.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? So item 6 was filed by me, ordered that a fund be created to implement a series of studies rotating between city departments each year to study best practices and methods of implementation for improvement of processes. Our city should constantly be seeking to improve how the public is served, and that requires regularly looking at internal processes. So the goal of this, I was speaking with the mayor a little bit. One thing that the mayor has done is wanting to do a lot of studies, whether it be trash studies, a police audit, and I believe those are very important. I know being part of the parking advisory committee, the most recent study was from, I believe it was 2012. So these studies get outdated, and these studies are important for us to make the decisions that we need to do to make sure our city is operating smoothly and with our best practices. So the goal with this one, and it may not necessarily be charter and rules, but it's to create some funds, $200,000, $300,000 that sort of goes to a different department every year. So one year this department DPW gets the $200 to do a study. The next year's police department, the year after, whatever department we decide as a council. But essentially what it is, it's sort of a mandatory study that needs to take place regardless of who's mayor. I think trying to institutionalize some of the things that Mayor Garcia is doing, and I think this is being one of them, where the mayor shouldn't be scrambling looking for money to studies. We should, as a city, already have that be part of our best practice, that every year this is a study that we do, in this 10-year rotating schedule, whatever we decide. But that's the intention behind that. Anything to say? So it is also in the ordinance committee, and I'm wondering if that would
be the best? Or any questions? Todd's face.
Well, no, I'm trying to think of how you do it. Like,
Or is
you know,
it
would you do a
possible?
revolving account? Would you do, you know, like we have revolving funds where you put money in as you need to, you go to it. You know, community field being an example. So the cell tower money goes into there, and as they need it, they use it. The fire department, we have a revolving account for them, so when they want to fix up some of the stations, they can just go to it. Paul came up with one for the vacant buildings, another good one. So I'm trying to think of a way to accomplish what you're trying to do. I'm not saying it should be a revolving account, but is that a way of doing it? And then two is we're asking for money, which then is it's going to have to be a financial request from the mayor to us and then approve it. So knowing that aspect, that the money has to come to us and we have to approve it, where does it get approved to, is my point. So that's why I'm trying to think of how to accomplish your goal here. And the only thing I can think of is a revolving account. I'm not sure if that's the best way, but that's why I had the face. Sorry.
So it's someone asked me earlier what I meant by this, so that's sort of just seeing your face of confusion a little bit, or thinking deeply just made me. I just needed to be clearer on what I wanted to accomplish with this order. So, Councilor Murphy Ramboletti.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you said that because that's kind of how I felt when I was reading this order, and I wanted to like get a better understanding of what your goal would be. I think it makes sense. I think it could be more of like a best practice for the mayor to do rather, but I mean, yeah, I don't know if that looks like a revolving fund or if it's a line item in the mayor's office, maybe, and that gets, spent accordingly for that purpose. I'm kind of just thinking out loud.
That
So
actually sounds great. No, that's great. See, thinking out loud is what we get. Councilor McGivern.
Councilor Maldonado, I don't think I'm confused to your intent or your goal. It makes sense. It's good business practice.
Thank you.
But the appropriation of money, we, the legislative body, cannot initiate an appropriation. So we can only recommend that a mayor, in the future or starting this year or next year does this. And it would be subject to an appropriation vote each year in the budget. I don't think a revolving fund will work because revolving fund is kind of like the money comes in from someplace, as Councilor McGee pointed out, like the community field or Roberts Field, where money, a source of money is coming in and then can be used for purposes that the revolving fund says it can. So I don't know if again, the revolving fund would be up to the mayor too, because we cannot initiate it. We can talk about it, and we can certainly ask, but before any money is spent, the mayor has to initiate the appropriation, and we get to say yes or no.
Okay. Thank you.
And we can't do it for future years, which is unfortunate, but that's the way the Mass General law is set up.
Okay. Thank you,
Yeah,
Councilor.
that's why I was trying to get around. I wasn't trying to get around it. It's bad terminology, but the way he said was, I want it for future, whoever is the mayor. And I'm thinking, if you have money in a revolving account, it's there. It's already been approved. But whereas the line item, it's the mayor has to put it in, whoever the mayor is at the time.
So I'm thinking sort of like what Councilor Murphy Ramboletti just said. I think that's a possible approach. If I wanted to do this, the mayor has an extra line item to do specific studies that are outlined by ordinance every year. We don't have to get that deep into it, but just following the thoughts of what was said today, trying to connect it back to what my goal is. Okay. Anything else? I'm done to table this.
Sure. Motion and table.
Motion to table.
Second.
And it's second. All in favor?
aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Motion to take up item 8.
A motion to take up 8.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So motion. Item 8 is an order put in by Councilor Israel Rivera, that the city solicitor office begin drafting a ballot question for next election cycle around marijuana social consumption sites, such as bars, cafes, for residents to vote on next election cycle, similar to the language below. The sale of marijuana products as those terms are defined by GLC 94G1 for consumption on the premises where sold is permitted when the sale occurs at restaurants, bars, cafes, or any establishment in which food or beverages are served. Councilor Rivera.
Thank you, Councilor Maldonado, for taking up this order. So I just filed the order pretty much just to begin the conversation and begin the process. I mean, I know I said I gave like pretty much like a time frame, but the idea is pretty much I kind of want to, when we get this all together and figured out, I would like to start the process as soon as possible to try to get the vote going, just so that businesses in the community that are trying to expand or look into doing this have the opportunity to do so in a way where Holyoke can actually take advantage of it. Like we saw in the beginning when the marijuana industry first started shooting or popping up, bad terminology, right? Started popping up. The first people that jumped on the wave were the first ones to benefit the most. And I feel like it would be the same whenever that becomes pretty much legal in the state to be able to do that. So I know Attorney Bissonette is here. If he could probably speak on some of that, and yeah, that's pretty much it for me with that. At least that's the idea behind it. And there are some places that possibly that are seeking this, and I guess for me it's just trying to find out answers for them. But yeah, that was it. Thank you.
I just have to say something.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I was not
Mr.
laughing at the counselor while he was talking. I just didn't understand why he was playing with a squeaky toy. No, I'm just
This
kidding.
is my daughter, man.
Because we can't see you, so it was just pointing that out there.
Hey, girl.
Any, Thank you, Councilor Rivera.
Sorry.
Oh, anyone? Councilor Murphy-Ramboletti.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think it's great that we start the conversation. I know on a statewide level, there's a lot of conversations that are happening about social consumption. And I just think it, even though I don't believe that we have to put this before the voters, I think it's really important that we have this conversation and we talk about what that kind of a question looks like. And I know that there's still a lot of unanswered questions on the state level as well. So I just think this is setting us up to be in the right position. Like Councilor Rivera was saying, just, to make sure that folks in the community who do want to take advantage of this economic opportunity are in the right position to do so. So those are just my thoughts on it. I think it's an important conversation.
Thank you. I know Attorney Bissonette came off mute. I don't know if you had anything to say, Attorney Bissonette.
Thank you. I'll be brief because I know the Patriots are on shortly. The social consumption issue is one where the legislature addressed in the recent cannabis reform bill. It should have been implemented by now. There was a flaw in the referendum language that prevented it from going into effect. The CCC now has a date of, I believe it's June 1st on the social consumption regulations, and we may not need to go forward with a referendum. That may be the city's choice, but we're waiting to see what what the final regulations are going to be, and whether or not, if a referendum is necessary, will we need to put it on the ballot, or can we put it on the ballot for the municipal election in 2023 instead of waiting for the state in 2024? And if that was the case, then it would follow the same rule. We need to get it certified and ready to go by August of next year, or vote in November of 2023.
Thank you, Attorney President. You said June 1st for the CCC deadline?
Yeah, they were given a number of regulatory responsibilities as a result of the new law, including impact fee overviews and reviewing all the host city agreements now. And they have until next summer to come up with regulations for all of that. Some may be sooner rather than later, but they do have some outside dates that are next summer. They're getting some pressure to make the social consumption licenses similar to the courier licenses, where there will be a 2 or 3 year period where only social equity or economic empowerment applicants may be eligible for those licenses. Again, something that remains to be seen with the regulations, but that's where things are at right now.
Okay, thank you. Councilor McGivern.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, with all due respect to Attorney Bissonnette, Councilor McGee and myself don't have to be brief because the Giants and Jets played yesterday. I think as we go forward with this, whether or not there's a referendum question required, I think we need to loop both the Board of Health and the License Board into this discussion. It's not something that I think just the City Council would make in a vacuum itself. I think it's something that's important in terms of whatever happens on premise, and there's certainly different types of products for cannabis, that I understand that, but there are issues that could go hand in hand with current laws and that are both with the Board of Health, and certainly go hand in hand with licenses that are issued for, I'm thinking more about alcohol consumption, but with the license board itself, and not knowing what the state final product of the state's going to be, it's kind of hard to get those discussions going, but I think at some point it would be important.
Thank you, Councilor McGivern. So I think what I'm hearing is continue this conversation with inviting the Board of Health, Licensing Board, Planning Board to the next meeting. Do we also, just how we're doing with item 7, refer to legal, to have a question made up, or do we want to wait on that after the conversation with Board of Health, Licensing Board?
I think we have to wait because we don't know what the final regs are. We don't know what.
So
I'd say bring everyone in.
Keep the conversation going, and
so
was that?
So the motion is to table and invite to the next meeting, when we bring it up again, the Board of Health, the Licensing Board.
Correct.
Cool.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay. So item 8 tabled, and invite Board of Health and Licensing Board. With that, that's all we have.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.